Welcome to the county seat. I'm your host, Chad Booth. Today we are bringing you the program directly from the state capitol. While the legislature's in session, we want to talk about this new movement about land and states' rights here in the state of Utah. There are a number of bills and resolutions that have been entered this year, and there's a different feeling coming from the state legislature where the issue of states' rights and state sovereignty is no longer a rural topic exclusively. What we're finding is that it's becoming a statewide and metropolitan topic as well, and that the areas of the Wasatch Front and the citizens within the larger cities and communities are really engaged in this for the first time. Have we finally reached a point where we're starting to recognize that the federal government and their holding of these massive deposits of land in the state are not only jeopardizing the economies of rural Utah, but also having an impact on the metropolitan areas of the state as well. Joining us, Mark Ward from the Utah Association of Counties, Representative Mike Noel, who represents almost the bottom half of the state of Utah.
Good to be here,
and
Chad.
Representative Ken Ivory. Thank you for joining us for the first time. What brought it about?
Well, I think we could call this bill, Chad, the educational equality bill, because as we try to balance the budget up here, that's our primary responsibility, is to take care of public education. And we found that it's almost an impossibility, if not an impossibility, to balance that budget with 1/3 of the or 2/3 of the land in federal ownership and only having 1/3 private property. So my colleague here, Representative Ivory, has been the champion of this bill. Those of us that have broke trail for him beforehand, there's many of us in the legislature, have championed him on this. And so the equality education equality for the state of Utah and for all the 11 western states is part of this movement.
How big is the scope of this? I mean, you know, in the Utah Enabling Act, when we became a state, and the precedent was that undedicated lands were supposed to be transferred to the states. So there would have been exclusions made for some federal properties, such as forests that had already been declared and national parks, military reservations. You know, does this bill honor those lands?
Correct, and that's a good point. Those are off the table. So even though national parks came after statehood, and so they should have gone through the Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, come to the state legislature, have consent from the state legislature. Even though they didn't do that, that's who we are. I mean, the national parks, the congressionally designated wilderness, that's part of our Utah heritage. So those are off the table, first and foremost. Then the bill establishes a Public Lands Commission. And the Public Lands Commission then receives that 116 years of rights and expectations that have developed with that land and manages open space and access, local control, and then the sustained yield of the natural resources.
Okay, so the one question that comes up is that the federal government would most likely look at forests as federally designated lands, but as I understand this, forests come over to the state, do they not, in this bill?
Yeah, as part of the bill. Now, the thing that's really interesting and to remember, what we do is we set a deadline based on unanimous Supreme Court authority less than 2 years ago. 2 years ago, the United States Supreme Court said the consequences of a state's admission are instantaneous, and it ignores the uniquely sovereign character of that event to even suggest, their language, to even suggest that somehow subsequent acts of Congress can diminish what was already bestowed at statehood. And then they said this statement: this applies with even greater force where virtually all of a state's public lands are at stake. So the U.S. Supreme Court opened the door to say, look, if Congress can't change the vested rights of our statehood, which means at statehood, they said, we're going to extinguish title to all the land. Same promise they made to North Dakota and Oklahoma and Iowa and all points east of Colorado. We're simply looking for the federal government to honor that same promise that they made with all the states east of Colorado, and by the way, Hawaii to our far west.
It actually was a very exciting moment when that language came to light out of that court decision. I thought that was a very interesting part of the dialogue. How's the transfer going to work? What's going to happen?
Well, first step, we take our sovereign act. The Hawaii case said the uniquely sovereign character of that event. We set a deadline. We've been waiting for 116 years. As Representative Noel said, we can't wait any longer. Our children are $2.2 billion away from average in per pupil funding because we don't have access to our lands. North Dakota, our neighbor to the north, has access to their lands, same promise. They're on a per pupil funding basis $4.4 billion ahead of us. So we simply can't wait any longer for that. So we set a deadline. December 31st, 2014, you need to dispose of that land to the Utah Public Lands Commission so that we can manage that multiple use sustained yield. So during that period, and this is critical, the first step is political. We've set a deadline. Now we want to act with you as a governing partner. We want to work with you during this 2-year period to figure out how best we're going to transfer that land, how we're going to make that work, how we're going to keep everyone whole as we do it. Again, manage and maintain all those existing rights that have developed over the 116 years of grazing and timber and mining and all the rest. If we can't manage that, and if they're not willing to work with us as a governing partner, then the Constitutional Defense Council is charged within the next year to come up with the sovereign acts that the state will take to secure the rights that are due to us under our Enabling Act.
Okay, that's a good start to it. We'll continue this conversation when we come back after this break. Stay with us here on the County Seat.
What do you picture when you hear Rich County, Utah? Bear Lake adventure, snowmobile action, pristine skiing, spectacular solitude. Well, if that isn't what first came to mind, then you just don't know Rich County. The Bear Lake Monster Polar Plunge, snowmobiling Monte Cristo, ice fishing Bear Lake, skiing the backcountry, fishing at the Cisco Disco. Come and find out what you never knew you were missing. Rich County, Utah.
What is play? Is it culture? Is it adventure? Is it...
Ooh, it's a destination.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
That's correct.
Cedar City and Bryan Head Resort in the heart of Iron County, where outdoor excitement, culture, and the iron industry melts together. Come and forge a new adventure where play is the thing. You haven't forgotten how to play. It's just that you haven't been to the right place yet.
Imagine a place where the world's largest concentration of scenic attractions can be found, where radiant cliffs of 2 national parks and 3 state parks tower to kiss the azure sky. Come and visit any one of the many memorable sites and events that Bryce Canyon Country, Garfield County, Utah has to offer. Drive along National Scenic Byway 143 and All-American Road Highway 12 and experience the ultimate adventure.
I remember the first time that our family found that canyon road. I thought, here we go again, another road to nowhere. But boy, was I wrong. It was 9 Mile Canyon, and what we saw was more than I could ever have expected. At the end of the day, my son asked,
Mom, can we come back here again?
That was all I needed to hear.
What happens in Utah's Castle Country stays with you. Find out more at castlecountry.com.